Hey guys, it's Utonia here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Retribution, which I think is probably the weakest assault frigate right now. The fit that I'm using, which it took a long time for me to decide upon this fit. I reviewed quite a lot of fits, and the Retribution is a ship that has really bad capacitor, really bad fittings overall. So it's one of those ships that it's really hard to find a fit on it that I was really happy with, unlike the other assault frigates where things kind of just clicked in place. So in the highs, I'm running for small focus beam lasers here, and that's for as much DPS as possible. What I'm kind of aiming for in this ship is to do DPS throughout the entirety of Scram range with multi-frequency. And on the guns up here, I have 265 DPS cold, which is really good for 12 kilometer optimal. I then have a compact Microwarpdrive, a faint Scram, 2 Tech 2 heat sinks, a small Ancillary rep, a Refuge adapted Nano plating just for omni resists, and then a specific A-type thermal plating to plug the thermal resistance hole. And I'm running a small Ancillary for the extra power grid needed to fit the beams, and a Tech 2 collision Accelerator to do even more DPS. So this fit that I'm running is, entirely focused on DPS, and we only get 265 DPS, but that is to the entirety of heated Scram range and a bit beyond. You also have the flexibility of being able to load into different damage types on this. You can, roll standard, and then you get a 24 kilometer optimal, so you can shoot people while they're kiting you. You can get rid of scepters quite well, which is a problem that a lot of the other assault frigates do have, is that they don't really have a way to catch a scepter reliably, and you can get perma tackled by something like a stiletto, whereas the Retribution doesn't really care. It can kind of force things off. You also do have the other flexibility of being able to load into Aurora again, and just be able to snipe people at 40k. A lot of the time you can just bait people to ram you to. I got a lot of kills in this actually from just sniping people at 40k, and then they just run in with a scepter to get a Scram on me, assuming that they can go under my guns, and then you just turn the Scram on and kill them. And just having this flexibility to be able to pop drones outside range, be able to harass things like procurers outside the range they can lock you and just pop a few drones. Just having that, this is one of the reasons I really like the Confessor. It's just the ability to just do stuff at range without committing is really nice. You can also force off pretty much every other every kiter, a Gamma, unless it's complete max pimp fit, is also going to struggle with keeping you pointed. Even with a Domination Warp Disruptor, you can pretty much hit him at that range. So why is the Retribution bad then? So the Retribution has horrific capacitor problems. You can see here I have 30 seconds of cap life, and if we go ahead and simulate this, and just assuming we're not using the rep, it can last for a while. Of course, we have Aurora loaded right now, which has a cap bonus. But yeah, we can scram and shoot for about 2 minutes, and you can also scram and shoot cap stable as long as you're not running the Ancillary on this. But the problem is that you have no way to regenerate cap. You're really weak to newts. You don't have a Nosferatu like the other ones. You don't have a web, so there's nothing really stopping you stopping you from just getting something on top of you, especially with a newt. It also doesn't really do that much DPS, despite being all in on DPS, and it has the weakest buffer as well. It has less buffer than a Wolf. It does about the same DPS as a Wolf, just it's to 12 kilometers instead of the Wolf, which does it at 1 kilometer. So yeah, and also we have a lot less tracking than the NU, Wolf, Harpy, those kind of ships, because we have to rely on beams. A few other fits that I was wrestling with, debating going. So the first fit was kind of like this Chesser style fit, Sir Edition style fit, where you run double nano, double heatsink, and you try and just fly it like a slicer that goes 1k a second slower, but has the tracking bonus and a bit more tank, although not really. It only has about 1.5k more HP, which isn't really all that much. And you also only have the one locus, so you don't quite have the same range, so you kind of have to run You do less DPS because you have to run like weaker crystals a lot of the time, whereas like a beam slicer can easily get away with something like gamma or X-ray. You almost have to rely on X-ray, and you only get 22-kilometer range on X-ray, so it's not even that reliable. So a lot of the time you're running standard when you're like pointing people, and then also you have like severe CPU issues too. It also requires a power grid implant, which I don't really like too much. So, I mean, 2% power grid implant on this fit, so I really didn't like that fit either. It also has horrific cap problems, as you can probably imagine. Trying to keep a point on someone and like running MWD and the disruptor, it just doesn't last very long, and again, it's dead in the water if it gets caught by anything. The other one that I was kind of debating too was sort of this more brawling style Retribution. So this is basically like you copy and paste the wall fit that I was running onto a Retribution instead, with the 200 plate, just the kind of same style, but it doesn't actually fit with beams, it doesn't fit with focus pulse either. So you have to drop down to dual light pulse laser 2s, and then you look at the DPS, 190 DPS compared to the Wolf's 250. It just doesn't do enough DPS to justify flying it over the Wolf, and then of course the Wolf has the capless guns, the selectable damage type. It only has like 2k more buffer than the Wolf, so it's so much slower than the Wolf 2. It has a bigger sig than the Wolf. There's no real reason to fly this over the Wolf basically, and with Scorch, I mean you do get 150 DPS, but the Wolf can do that DPS at that range too, so you don't even get really the range flexibility. You just get the insta swapping crystals, but that doesn't really matter too much. The Wolf has the fall off bonus, and so it doesn't really care too much about getting kited in Scram range. Really, I mean the Wolf could kill this Retribution, and the Wolf also doesn't have Scram range issues. It's faster. So yeah, I kind of decided on a fit that was sort of between those two kind of styles, where I'm going for kind of like the Chester beam fit, but more tank mods instead of nano mods, and then a Scram instead. Because at least with the Scram and the beams, you can actually perma-run that instead of having cap issues on the other ships. You still, you only have 8k EHP, which isn't that great for assault frigates. Most of the other ones that I was flying had about 10k. But, I mean, it can work. I think the main issue with the Retribution is the fact that it has 4 turret-related bonuses, but it just doesn't really have the DPS. To make this kind of fit work, you're sacrificing a lot to run this fit. You've got really bad tracking. You get destroyed by newts. You're pretty slow. Don't really have all that much buffer. And that's all of your bonuses are just all dedicated into this. I'd really like to see the damage bonus increased. Maybe get rid of one of these other bonuses, like get rid of the tracking maybe. I would actually really enjoy a ship like that a bit more. Kind of similar to what the Zealot has right now. Just a ship that's like really flawed in terms of... it's got a lot of flaws, 2 mids, weak to newts, slow, but if you can pull it off, it does a fuck ton of DPS, which is kind of the similar design of the Zealot. The Zealot actually has identical bonuses to the Retribution, except that the Zealot also gets a medium turret rate of fire bonus instead of the tracking bonus. So I would like to see that kind of change. So then that way the Retribution just pumps out trucks tons of DPS, but it has like the tracking difficulties and all of that. I'd like to see that design a bit more. I really like ships that have like really narrow niches, but if you can like pull off those niches, they work pretty well. I guess I'll just cover the bonuses again quite quickly. You have on the frigate bonus activation cost and tracking speed, so there's no real damage bonuses on the Amar frigate bonus, unfortunately. A lot of the other assault frigates actually have their damage bonuses on the frigate bonus, so unfortunately as well you're going to have to train assault frigates to level 5 to get the most out of the ship, unlike ships like the Hawk and the Vengeance, which get all of their damage from the frigate bonus and the NU, and then you just get like the extra stuff from the assault frigates, and this you get the reason to fly the ship on the assault frigate bonus. So if you don't have assault frigates level 5, then Retribution is also a lot worse than the other assault frigates, unfortunately. In summary, I would say that I would probably much rather enjoy flying the Wolf over this. The Retribution is the least flown ship on com, according to stats. It has the worst sort of like matchup rates, but I mean, you know, it is what it is. If you want to fly the Retribution, you know, give this fit a go. I did have quite a bit of success with it, although I think I would have enjoyed flying the Wolf or the NU a lot more than this ship. Anyway, check out some of these clips. And I hope you have fun with this ship, but I would recommend you stay away from it. So in this first fight with this Harpy, obviously I want to abuse my extra range. I do a lot of DPS to 12 kilometers, like I mentioned with this fit, so I want to kite him out at the edge of Scram range as much as possible. I realize at this point though that he only has an afterburner only, so he actually doesn't really have the ability to close range. So what I'm doing here is I'm kind of just like matching his speed by like double clicking in space and control spacing to stop my ship, to just sort of like maximize how much DPS I can get on him. And like once I get him low enough, I kind of decide to let him catch me and go in. And then I can, you know, hopefully finish him off. Although he does have an afterburner here, and he does scram and web me, and he does kind of end up going under my guns a little. And you have to be really careful with this Retribution about this, even with the tracking bonus and beams, which have a relatively decent tracking compared to rail guns and artillery. You still need to be really careful with people like using afterburners to go on your guns. You're really vulnerable to dual prop ships, so be very careful about a ship like a Tyrannus or a Public Fleet Firetail, because they will be able to exploit this. I am able to load Gleam and sort of double click in space to sort of take myself away from him, but I still have trouble hitting him, and I'm able to finish him off at least. But you know, even with Gleam, even with beams, you're going to struggle to sort of hit people in this kind of situation. And that Harpy had a big sig too for a frigate, so just, you know, keep that in mind and be really careful when engaging afterburner ships or ships that might be dual prop. So this next fight is versus a light missile Jackdaw. He shot me on a gate and then whooped up to this Fortizar, and I realized that he's still aggressed, so I can probably kill him. So I landed quite close to him. That's why I'm missing my shields, is because he already aggressed me. So I run into him. I really want to use Gleam on him. I know he's got a light missile, so I want to be as close as possible and just sit on him, since I'm never going to mitigate his DPS no matter where I am. So I just have to be on top of him as close as possible. I shoot him with standard while I'm burning in, and I reload to Gleam. That's the good thing about lasers, is you can instantly reload, so get some free DPS in while I'm burning for him. It turns out he's like some kind of weird like dead space shield booster light missile Jackdaw, but I'm doing really good, and that's why I really like having the high damage. Unfortunately, he has a friend in a Loki decloak and starts shooting me. And I actually missed the Jackdaw there too. I missed like a bit of damage there, which is a bit of a mistake. You need to be really careful. Like even ships like Jackdaws can mitigate damage if you don't fly correctly. So in this point, I'm just trying to get away from this Loki. Unfortunately, it's really difficult to run away from a Loki that has faction web and disruptor. I'm sort of debating on what I should do. Do I approach him and scram him? He does have artillery, so maybe if I got on top of him, I might be able to kill him, but he was going like really slow. He was going like 700 ms, so I kind of suspected that he was afterburner only anyway. So my best chance was probably to run. I'm not running the rep right now because I really need to cap for my MWD, and that's kind of where the cap issues come in on the Retribution. I died 28k from him, so I was actually really close to getting out there, which kind of sucks. Like if I had an extra 2 seconds, I could have maybe got out. So this clip right here is just sort of another fight with a Jackdaw, just to show that a lot of T3Ds will disrespect you in an assault frigate. And even though the Retribution is probably one of the worst assault frigates for brawling down tactical destroyers like this Jackdaw, you can still pull it off and do it. So I aggro this guy at 0, and he was in a light missile Jackdaw. I already looked at him, so I know he's light missiles, but surprisingly he does have a scram and a web, and I think this guy also has like a dead space shield booster kind of fit. Or actually, I think this is a double MSAB fit, like double medium ancillary shield booster fit. So I start working on 2500. Unfortunately for him, he actually loaded Kodari Navy Nova, so he does really bad damage to me, and he has only just like got me into armor at this point. The Retribution, of course, has really huge shield explosive resistances. So if someone makes the mistake of loading explosive damage versus you, you can actually last for a very long time. The Retribution has 88% explosive resist, so you take almost 1/10 of the damage. So because he had made a mistake by loading the wrong damage type, and he also did not take advantage of the Ejector's bonus of being able to swap ammo really quickly, I was able to kill this guy. But it's still pretty, even though he's using explosive damage on me, he's still forcing me to sort of pulse my rep quite a lot. If he was using a type like EM or Scourge or Thermal, he might have even been able to pressure me a lot more. But yeah, you can brawl down these light missile Jackdaws in the Retribution, and even with the sort of, lack of like any real kind of brawling buffer stats. It's just kind of a weird fight, I guess, just to show you like how powerful the Retribution is, even if you're not actually brawling in Scram range. Like, the flexibility of being able to shoot at long range is really nice, and you can set up a lot of fights in your favor. So Ab Killer here, or AB Killer, I'm not sure how his name goes. He's also someone who posts PvP videos on YouTube, so I'm sure if you search for AB Killer in YouTube, you should be able to find his videos. They're pretty cool, actually. He wanted to fight. He's in an Atron, so he's at a pretty big disadvantage anyway. But I suspect he might be like a dual prop fit or something, which might be really dangerous for me. Or, some kind of like really hardcore brawler that might be able to get under my gun. So I'm sort of just double clicking away and shooting him with Aurora at this point. And my plan is to sort of reload to Multifrequency and then like heat a Scram and kind of hold him. He doesn't quite actually get into Scram range here. He actually pulls out. But I'm able to just like swap back into, when the ammo swapping thing isn't that clunky, I'm still able to track him with Aurora at this range. I think at this point he's trying to rep himself back up and then go back in for another attempt on me. But I'm able to just keep up the pressure with Aurora, and the tracking bonus is quite nice for tracking like frigates that are sort of NWDing around, like things like Garmas and stuff. If they're trying to point you at range, they're just gonna die to Aurora. So you get that defense of being able to just pick people off at range. I know that's probably not the best fight because he didn't do any damage to me, but I don't know, it kind of really highlights the Retribution's like flexibility in terms of just doing damage at range and forcing people to come in. So this is a quick fight against a couple of gate campers. They had an Onyx and a Navy Augur on the other side. Then they got a Saber and Thrasher on this side and an RT Thrasher. So I decided to go in on the Thrasher to get rid of him as soon as possible. So I feel like he's a bigger threat to me than the Saber is. The Saber's kind of weird in this fight. I think the Saber is dual boxed. I think the Saber probably belongs to like the Navy Augur or the Onyx or someone else who was camping me on the other side, because he's like really kind of unresponsive. So I killed the RT Thrasher. I kind of just brawled in. I think do have like a slide tracking advantage versus a Thrasher, but I mean I ended up missing a shot there. He missed a shot there, so I think we could just the only option we really have is to just kind of trade. But at least with my explosive resistance profile, I can kind of deny him the opportunity to really use like Quake, the high damage, high tracking ammo, whereas I can use my high damage, high tracking value versus him if I sort of go in close. So that was kind of my mentality there. The Saber pilot's pretty weird again in this fight. He scrams me. He does actually have he's actually in like a full PvP fit, but he decides not to do any damage to me for some reason. I assume his main is the Onyx or like one of the other ships that were part of the gate camp on the other side. So I'm able to kill the Saber here. He starts moving away, but because I have just like great damage to 12k, I'm able to finish him off. And the Navy Augur at this point comes in, but I'm able to like kind of just burn away because the Hick pilot, for whatever reason, decided that the Hick Scram is overrated. It's actually balanced now, so no point in carrying it anymore, right? So I'm able to just like heat MWD and get away from these guys and warp out. But yeah, that was kind of an interesting fight. I think it would have been maybe a lot harder if the Saber pilot was kind of away, because as you can see, he was in like a fleet fit, but he did have like autocannons, he'd have guns. Like, it could have been like a much more sketchy fight if he was like actually like paying 100% attention to that character. So to summarize my thoughts on the Retribution, I think it's a ship that is very flawed, but it kind of has a niche where it works really well. And that's sort of like at the edge of Scram range, kiting, blowing people up at that range. It would be nice, I think, to see it get a bit more damage, so you can just kind of make that the Retribution's niche. Maybe get rid of the tracking bonus for the rate of fire bonus. So it just does like insane DPS, like 350 DPS you know, like 12 kilometers. I'd really enjoy a ship like that. I think a good comparison to the Retribution is a ship like the Eris, which is the Galanti Interdictor, where it's a ship that's like really terrible, and it's like the objectively the worst interdictor as the role of like a fleet interdictor. But if you take off the bubble launcher and you just turn it into like an 800 DPS gank machine, it's still pretty bad. But if you can kind of just make it work, it can be really, really powerful. And I kind of feel like the Retribution has that sort of feel to it, that sort of theme to it, where it's a ship that's really flawed, but if you can kind of make it work, it can be really powerful in that like small window of opportunity, with, you know, a lot of weaknesses. If you're new, I'd recommend you stay away from the Retribution. It's a ship, like I mentioned, it has a lot of weaknesses. It also requires a lot of skill points to work very well. You need max cap skills. Probably want Assault Frigates level 5 too, because all of the damage and the optimal range is on the Assault Frigate skill, unfortunately. And also, I think it's a really hard ship to fly too. You really need to know how to manually pilot and sort of set things up so that people are like coasting into you with inertia to be able to apply your DPS to them pretty well. I'd recommend maybe flying the Wolf, the Jaguar, Enu, or Harpy if you want like kind of ships that are a bit easier to fly, because this one requires quite a bit of micromanagement to be successful. But yeah, you know, the Retribution, it's a bad ship, but it can be really satisfying at times. And also, I mean, because it's bad and everyone knows that it's horrible, it can be a good ship to just get fights in. Because, you know, I actually got engaged by a lot of Tech 1 frigates in this ship. They were really willing to fight me, whereas I'm pretty sure like all the other frigates would have just ran away from a Hawk or an NU. And it can be really satisfying when you just get that sort of, you know, you're like 12 kilometer like super damage to work in some situations, like just blowing up this Atron here, and he was just willing to fight me too, because, you know, everyone knows that the Retribution is bad, which is kind of fun. And also one-shotting pods is cool too. Thanks for watching. I'll see if I can get up like an assault frigate like tier list kind of video where I just like summarize my thoughts on AFs and maybe the problems of the class and what I think each like individual assault frigate could do with quite well. But anyway, that's it for this video, and that's all the assault frigates done. I actually didn't hate this ship as much as I thought I would, but I mean, it's still pretty bad. Thanks for watching, and, you know, check out my other videos, and hopefully I'll get that assault frigate video up later.